He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Mark Levin here. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. Well, I'm going to address a few things that may not be the biggest of headlines, but they are very, very important and should be the biggest of headlines. This administration, this Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, is at war with the state of Texas. And I want to tell you why. Because if Texas ever goes Democrat, there's no conceivable way the Republicans can ever win the presidency. And so Eric Holder has as his mission, to destroy voter integrity in Texas, to prevent border security in Texas, and I'm going to prove it to you. The Supreme Court ruled not too long ago that voter identification requirements, as long as they're reasonable, are solutions to voter integrity concerns, and that states can pass them. In other words, this has already been addressed by the Supreme Court of the United States. So regulations imposing ordinary burdens, such as those requiring a nominal effort by all voters treated equally, are not considered severe. They're not considered obstructions to the voting process. They're not considered discriminatory against one group or another. And how could they be? You couldn't get on an airplane today without a government-issued photo ID. You couldn't rent an apartment today. You can't get a six-pack of beer. Who's kidding whom around here? But you see, the Democrat Party and Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and so forth, they cease to exist, or at a minimum, they cease to be effective unless they promote race baiting and racism themselves. And that's what they are. They're in the race industry, not the colorblind industry, not the justice industry, but the race industry. So the Supreme Court's already ruled on this. And still, Eric Holder has zeroed in on Texas. You may not remember, but he gave a speech with incendiary terms attacking the Texas voter ID law to the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He said many of those without IDs would have to travel great distances to get them, and some would struggle to pay for the documents they might need to obtain them. We call those poll taxes. No, we don't call those poll taxes. What a disgrace. What a demagogue. So in other words, folks, you have to pay a poll tax in order to get a photo ID to get on an airplane. So the government then is in the business of rampant, widespread racial discrimination. How stupid and ignorant is that? But it doesn't matter. Holder felt no urgency to offer any substantive information about exactly how many individuals would be inconvenienced by a photo ID requirement, or how those same individuals manage to function in their daily lives without a photo ID right now. So this is a completely fraudulent issue. Completely fraudulent issue. Because Eric Holder really is the opposite of wanting voter integrity. He wants voter fraud. You'll remember when the Justice Department interfered with the state of Florida that was trying to clean its voter lists of dead people, of people who had registered multiple times, people from out of state. And remember, they took action to prevent it, and a judge had to had to say, no, of course Florida can do this. As a matter of fact, Florida is required to do this. This is so important because we have the Justice Department, or as I call it, the Injustice Department, taking aim at Texas and, quite frankly, other states, not to advance the franchise, not to advance equality and justice, but the opposite. The opposite. And let me add this point, my own point. Citizens have responsibilities in this country. If you can't figure out a way to get your hands on a free government photo ID, either to have a relative pick it up or have somebody mail it to you or 1,000 different ways, then maybe you shouldn't vote. You have some affirmative responsibilities. You're not a baby. You're not a child. You're a mature adult. You're going to vote. So you should be required to take the most minimal, nominal steps to acquire information that you provide on Election Day to demonstrate you are who you say you are. That's not a poll tax. That's not a literacy test. And the Supreme Court has said so. Now, why am I talking about this? Because this from ABC News, and everything I just told you is not in this news story. And yet it's a little relevant, isn't it? The Obama administration will sue Texas to block its voter ID law, the Justice Department said today. The lawsuit will challenge the law under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. This is why the Voting Rights Act has become a joke. Has become an absolute joke. The Voting Rights Act is used, abused, misused by a hack radical attorney general to prevent a state from issuing and requiring photographic identification to register and vote. Now, this Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, or language. Now, if Texas were only giving voter IDs to black people or Hispanic people or Asian people or white people, that would be one thing. But they're not. Texas moved swiftly to implement its voter ID law after the Supreme Court in June struck down a requirement that states with a history of racial discrimination seek permission from the federal government to change their voting laws. By the way, the federal government has a history of racial discrimination. I mean, it was the federal government that passed the 2 fugitive slave laws. It was the federal government in the federal Supreme Court that issued the Dred Scott decision, the Plessy versus Ferguson decision, segregation, the earlier one upholding slavery. It was the federal Supreme Court with a federal administration that instituted the internment of Japanese Americans and Americans of descent only 60-some years ago. Supreme Court upheld it in the Korematsu decision. So who has a history of racial discrimination in this country? Seems to me not just certain states, but the federal government has it too. Eric Holder today. Today's action marks another step forward in the Justice Department's continuing effort to protect the voting rights of all eligible Americans. Do you see how the radical leftists lie and propagandize? We will not allow the Supreme Court's recent decision to be interpreted as open season for states to pursue measures that suppress voting rights. Suppress voting rights. A voter identification a piece of information given by the state. So what are we doing now? Suppressing driver's rights if you don't have a driver's license? Suppressing smoking and drinking rights if you don't have a driver's license to show at the 7-Eleven? Suppressing your right to air traffic? To fly an airplane? To rent an apartment? To get a bank account? Despite the court's decision, the Obama administration has taken an aggressive stance on voting laws that it believes restricts minorities' voting rights. How in the hell does a voter ID card, a driver's license, or something akin to that discriminate against minorities? In the District of Columbia, where the mayor is a black man, where the city council has a number of black people on it, do they not issue driver's licenses in the District of Columbia? The answer is yes. Do they not require driver licenses in the District of Columbia to buy alcohol and cigarettes? The answer is yes. Do not landlords in the District of Columbia require driver's licenses or some form of photo ID to rent an apartment? The answer is yes. Is not the TSA a part of the federal government? Yes. Are not those employees civil servants? Yes, they are. Do they not require you to show a photo ID through security before you even get to the part where you have to take your clothes off and get on the airplane? Yes, they do. And they require it. Does not every state in the union, red, blue, purple, pink, require you to have a registration card, that is a driver's license, in order to drive any kind of vehicle? The answer is yes. So what do they mean you're discriminating? What is that? And you know what's interesting about these lawsuits, ladies and gentlemen, because Landmark Legal Foundation has been involved in a number of them, including in Pennsylvania, which has a long history of slavery and segregation. Oops, wait a minute. The Quaker state was a free state, and the Underground Railroad was most active in Pennsylvania, and yet Pennsylvania is covered by this. So the question is, what's going on here? ABC News missed the entire story. ABC News is fed a press release, talks to government officials, and regurgitates what they're told. We have a Justice Department that is completely out of control, a Justice Department that is run by a complete political hack who comes out of a law firm that represented more terrorists at Guantanamo Bay than any other law firm. And he himself, Holder, he himself recommended that the FALN Puerto Rican terrorists get pardons. He himself, while at the Justice Department as Deputy Attorney General, helped work the system to make sure that Mark Rich, a big-time crook, would get a pardon. This is not a man of principle. He's a man of fanatical ideology. You stand strong, Texas, and all you other states. This is not discrimination. It's not a poll tax. It's not a literacy tax. The Supreme Court has said that this is constitutional. Stand firm and take them on. Because Eric Holder's real goal is to destroy Texas, to make sure that Democrats forevermore are elected. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Tell you what, any of you out there, any of you leftists, Obamaites, Holderites, so forth and so on, why don't you call in and give me a reason why a government-issued photographic identification, which you would get for free, why don't you tell me why that's a poll tax or literacy test? Why don't you tell me why that's so difficult to secure? In the litigation in Pennsylvania I was talking about earlier, the ACLU, or maybe it was the NAACP, was arguing that hundreds of thousands of minorities would be turned away. The problem was they couldn't show us one. One. Apparently in another state they found one person that they thought would have difficulty getting it. and that person has been used every time. And I'm thinking to myself, why would that person have difficulty getting it? The ACLU can secure the ID for them. But one person doesn't make a nationwide poll tax or literacy test or a statewide poll tax or literacy test. This is outrageous. And the left is trying to suppress the votes of those who are legally able to vote by diluting it with fraud. So the question is put out for Obama supporters, Holder supporters, liberals all. The question is put out, please tell us why it's so difficult for anybody to receive a free photographic voter identification card, driver's license, or something akin to that. Have you ever tried to go into a hotel without a photo ID? Well, they won't let you stay. I mean, I can give you the whole list. You know the whole list. Booze, cigarettes, air flight, leasing, purchasing, and so forth and so on. Now, as you know, I was chief of staff to an attorney general at the Justice Department. Seems like an awfully long time ago. Eric Holder works there now, and he was a deputy attorney general under Clinton. Have you ever tried to get into the Justice Department? Now, I worked there. If you don't have a government-issued photo ID, even way back when, before 9/11, you don't get in. So I would ask Eric Holder, are you racially discriminating against minorities who can't get photo IDs to come into the department and see you? I have another question for Eric Holder. Are you a disgraceful liar? Are you a disgraceful demagogue? Are you a useless attorney general who abuses your office to seek to impose your political and policy will on the American people? The answer is yes, yes, and yes. That's exactly what you are. You're a disgrace. All the states that are in this battle, you continue this battle. And I say this to you Supreme Court members who may be listening to this program. If a photographic ID is racial discrimination, then ban it for all purposes, including entering federal buildings, including entering the Supreme Court of the United States. I'll be right back.
Some hosts talk about the news. Mark Levin influences the news. Call the Mark Levin Show now at 877-381-3811.
So where's the evidence? ACLU, American Criminal Liberties Union. Where's the evidence? NAACP. Where's the evidence of widespread discrimination against minorities or anybody else? Because they can't get a free government-issued photo ID. Where's the evidence? Well, the ACLU has tried. As our friend Hans von Spakovsky has written, the ACLU has tried. It tried in Pennsylvania at a case of a woman, 92-year-old black woman. That's North Carolina, I should say. Well, it turns out she didn't have any problem getting a voter ID, and the authorities in North Carolina said, what's the problem? Oh, then they found a 93-year-old black woman in Philadelphia. Problem is, it took her 20 minutes to get a photo ID. Now they think they have a 39-year-old computer programmer who recently moved to Kansas City from Seattle. But that won't fly either. This is the best the ACLU and the NAACP can come up with. This is it. This is what they present in court. And the big, lib, pathetic media in this country, they don't even look at the filings, they don't look at the rulings, they don't look behind anything, including the political motivation. Mr. Call Screener, have we found somebody who is defending this? Not one. nor will we, because it's such a pathetic joke. A poll tax or literacy test, you can be the most illiterate, mind-numb buffoon and get a photographic ID and vote. There is no literacy test. And the cards are free. There is no poll tax. But that doesn't stop Eric Holder from repeating what he knows to be racially intense words, to stir people up, to mislead, to lie about suppressing the vote. The votes we seek to suppress are those of people who seek to commit fraud. We're leaving 2 lines open. 2. For somebody to defend this. Including some of you fools in the voting rights section at the Justice Department. So this is what the civil rights movement has become, ladies and gentlemen. Phony lawsuits to prevent states from ensuring that their vote has integrity. That's what the civil rights movement has become. What a pathetic joke. Absolutely pathetic. All right, folks, now as you know, the Liberty Amendments are part of a process, a state convention process that bypasses the U.S. Congress, bypasses the federal government. So it bypasses senators. But Tom Coburn, as we heard yesterday from a very lovely lady who attended a town hall meeting, Senator Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, was in Muskogee last night, and this issue came up. Again, keep in mind, Senator Tom Coburn would have nothing to do with it, but still his input is interesting. And Mr. Producer and Mr. Call Screener went back. I think Mr. Producer, well, it doesn't matter. They went back on C-SPAN. Apparently it was covered by C-SPAN, right, Rich? And he had to listen to an hour of this town hall, but he found the clips related to this. So this first clip, Mr. Producer, is Senator Coburn himself, correct? At the town hall meeting in Muskogee last night, cut 1, go.
And we need to change it. And that's why I said the pretty outlandish statement is that I'm afraid not to have a constitutional convention. I don't think we have time to wait. And I think Mark Levin has done a great service to this country by raising those issues. Now, he's pretty harsh sometimes, but the fact is we have real problems and they need real solutions. And that's one, and nobody else is offering anything that comes close to it.
Well, I want to thank the senator. Harsh, I would say passionate, but harsh sometimes too, yes. But it is not a constitutional convention. I'm bringing a close friend of mine onto this program at the bottom of the third hour, 8:30 Eastern if you're listening live. He's an accomplished, nationally renowned law school professor at Georgetown University School of Law. Professor Randy Barnett. Now, we don't agree on everything, but we agree on a lot. And he and I are going to talk briefly at 8:30 p.m. Eastern about this convention. He likes to call it an amendments convention. I kind of like the name. It is not a constitutional convention because the language within the Constitution itself limits the convention. But still, what Senator Coburn said is great progress, ladies and gentlemen. This guy's no pushover. Now, he's asked a question, and I believe the question's a little hard to hear. And the questioner says, and we'll play it, I watched Mark Levin last night on Hannity, and he brought up that there are only 2 ways to resolve what we're going through as a country. One of them is going to be bloody. The other is a state convention. Is there any conversation going on among the states and as an individual? What do we need to do to get that started? He also made the point it's going to take a while to get it done. I just want to repeat, Senator Coburn would have no role in this, other than as a citizen, but as a senator, no role. So let's play it. Cut 2, go.
I watched Mark Levin the other night on Hannity, and he brought up it's only 2 ways to resolve what we got going on in this country. One of them's going to be real bloody. And he said the other one is a state convention, which you just mentioned. Is there any conversation going on among the states? And as a individual, what do we need to do to get that started? Because he also made the point it's going to take a while to get it done.
It is. Well, first of all, that wouldn't go through me. That would come through your state legislature. And so what do you need to do is you need to, first of all, I would recommend you read that book and have a good understanding of the case to be made so you can defend your position. Number 2 is you have to lobby your state legislators because they're the ones that have to make that decision. You know, I don't agree with everything in his book, but I certainly agree with his attempt at a solution where we find neither political party tends to have the courage to stand up and do the things it's supposed to do.
Fair enough. And people don't have to agree with everything in my book. Although I'm prepared to defend everything in my book. But this is remarkable in many ways, frankly. This book has been out. How long has it been out, Rich? A little over a week? It's been out a little over a week, ladies and gentlemen, and it is sparking debate all over the Internet, one website after another. It is sparking debate among members of Congress and in the media. And it's crucially important, in my humble opinion, that you participate in this. Because ideas can be very, very powerful. And this idea was set forth in your Constitution by your forefathers, the framers of the Constitution. This is your history. This is your Constitution. This is your country. This is your government. I say it all the time, and I cannot underscore it enough. It doesn't belong to Barack Obama. It doesn't belong to the media or to the colleges and universities. It doesn't belong to Supreme Court justices. It belongs to you. You. And to my great delight, Senator Coburn agrees. One more clip, cut 3, go.
You know, it's kind of like the conversation I had with Jim DeMint, the head of Heritage, which is the brainchild behind all this, is I'd love for there to be 60 conservatives in the Senate. How many of you all think that's a realistic expectation that that's going to happen in my lifetime? It isn't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. So the point is we ought to go with the Mark Levin recommendation and take back our power.
And what he means by the Heritage Foundation getting behind it, he's talking about defunding Obamacare through the continuing resolution, which he opposes. But he also said he might support it under the debt ceiling issue. So the point is we ought to go with the Mark Levin recommendation and take back our power. Ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line is there's no other way. There's really no other way. I can't think of another way. If somebody can think of another way, I'm here. Tell us, please. Now's the time. We want to know. And I don't mean some abstraction or novelty. It's right there in the Constitution, and it will be difficult. I've had a lot of marvelous interviews with local radio hosts all over the country. I'm trying to speak to as many, mostly morning hosts, but also other hosts. Just wonderful people. I want to thank each and every one of you. I've probably done 30 or 40 now. I want to thank you for inviting me on your programs, and every single host has been thoughtful and engaging and articulate. This profession I'm in, talk radio, is trashed all the time. I'm going to tell you something. There is some real trash in this business. But I won't get into that. But there's an awful lot of good people. there's a lot of great talent, a lot of great national and local talent on the radio today. And I tell you, I'm just thrilled to talk to so many of these wonderful people. And the point is, folks, I can hear it in their voices and what they say to me and the questions they're asking. They see hope in this too. If there's another way, then we need to know what it is. And folks have a responsibility to present it. Because now there is no other time. Now's the time. I use the Constitution as my guide. Now, our opponents are diabolical. They don't use the Constitution for anything other than to wipe their feet on it, while claiming they're the ones upholding it. They're not. And so this dialogue that has now reached into town hall meetings with senators and congressmen, this dialogue, which is all over the internet, you, the Paul and Paulette Reveres in my audience, more than anybody else, hopefully, will run with it. We'll spread the word. We'll read the book. This book is written for you. It's not written for the professional ruling class. I don't care what they think. It's not written for people who have already surrendered and are whining and lamenting and telling us it's all over, it's all over. Great. Well, we'll leave you behind too. This book is written for you. The people who not only love this country. I didn't say love the federal government. There's a difference. Love this country. And want to do something about it. I don't know if this will be done in my lifetime or your lifetime, but I do know this. It won't be done at all if we don't start seriously engaging intellectually, using our free speech rights to promote it. And I'll do every damn thing I can. But I need your help. You're an army of millions. All right. The AARP supports Obamacare, encourages reckless government spending, wants to curb your Second Amendment rights. If you want a conservative alternative that supports our Constitution, believes in limited government, supports the rights of gun owners and protecting the sanctity of life, then you need to join AMAC. I urge you to go to amac.us now to learn more. AMAC offers all the same medical, dental, vision, and prescription drug benefits and discounts you'd expect, as well as exclusive benefits and discounts and travel related to travel and so many other things. What they don't offer is support of a dangerous left-wing agenda and more reckless spending out of Washington. That's the AARP. And I'm a proud AMAC member, and I highly encourage you to become one too, because together we can keep America strong. So visit amac.us right now and join. Again, that's amac.us, not .com, .us. So visit amac.us or call 888-262-2006. That's 888-262-2006. Give them a call right now. They're waiting for you. Or go to amac.us.
Mark Levin.
As a side point, I understand Barack Obama was flying around on our dime, spewing silliness again. And where was he? In Buffalo, New York? And even with a teleprompter, he can't get the mayor's name right. Let's listen to this, shall we? Go.
Your outstanding mayor, Brian Higgins, is here. Give him a big round of applause. What? Byron Brown. I'm sorry, Byron. What I meant was your Congressman Brian Higgins is here. Your mayor, Byron Brown, is here. This is what happens when you get to be 52.
No, you can't get anything right. You can't get anything right. If you're a Republican, you would have been laughed out of the country by now. You can't get anything right. Policy, the big stuff, the little stuff. You don't even know the mayor of Buffalo. You're going to Buffalo. It should be up there on your teleprompter in big, bold, capital print letters so you can't miss it. And after that, nobody paid attention to a damn thing he said. And what did he say? Who knows? Who cares? You know what I know? He doesn't like to be around the White House. Fights to get to the White House, and then he doesn't want to be at the White House. I don't know. Doesn't he want to go check out Michelle's organic garden in the back there? You know, there's so much to do there. And typically, when we look at his schedule put out by the White House, Mr. Producer, his day starts, what, 9:45, 10, 10:30? Very, very busy. Apparently, it's not that hard to destroy America. It's a part-time job. What's the big deal? No wonder these people run for president. I don't think they have to work that hard. At least in this case. Do we have any, let's see, I don't see any. Do we have any liberals or others who believe that it's racial discrimination to require somebody to have a government-issued free voter ID? I don't see any. I wonder why that is. I would love to question Eric Holder about this, but I suspect he wouldn't take any questions from me. Kind of like Reince Priebus. We've invited Reince Priebus on the show, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, to ask him what happened to the offer to allow me to moderate Republican primary debates. We've been accepting it. We get on here.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. Hour 2. I'm Mark Levin. Our number, 877-381-3811. 877-381-3811. Well, here's another George Will piece honing in on the lawlessness of the administration. Mark, so what? Well, stick with me on this. I don't just give you this stuff to fill up time. It's not filler. I do it to make a point. This is George Will. It says, nowadays, the federal government leavens its usual quotient of incompetence with large dollops of illegality. This is eliciting robust judicial rebukes, as when last week the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia instructed the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, NRC, to stop flouting the law. We talked about this, but stay with me, please. Judge Brett Kavanaugh said, it is no overstatement to say that our constitutional system of separation of powers would be significantly altered if we were to allow executive and independent agencies to disregard federal law in the manner asserted in this case. Unquote. George Will goes on. For 6 decades, the nation has been studying the challenge of safely storing nuclear waste from weapons production, Navy vessels, and civilian power plants. So far, more than $15 billion has been spent developing a waste repository system deep within Yucca Mountain, 90 miles northwest of Las Vegas. The Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982 says the NRC shall consider the Yucca Mountain application to become a repository and shall approve or disapprove the application within 3 years of its submission. Shall means must. The application submitted in June 2008 has not been acted upon, and the court said, by its own admission, the commission has no current intention of complying with the law. Judge Raymond Randolph, an excellent judge, by the way, in a concurring opinion said former NRC Chairman Gregory Jacko orchestrated a systematic campaign of noncompliance. Jacko unilaterally ordered commission staff to terminate the review process in October 2010, instructed staff to remove key findings from reports evaluating the Yucca Mountain site, and ignored the will of his fellow commissioners. This is, I'm sure, because of Harry Reid. But to me, this isn't even the issue, the Yucca Mountain issue. Just stay with me. Jocko resigned last year, leaving the NRC in demoralized disarray. And the New York Times reported charges of mismanagement and verbal abuse of subordinates, and that of all four of his fellow commissioners, two from each party, complained that Jocko to the White House and told a congressional committee that he unprofessionally berated the agency's professional staff and reduced female employees to tears with his comments. I hear this goes on in other places, too. Some legal departments in some companies. But that's neither here nor there. To be fair to him, writes George Will, he was put there to disrupt. He was put there by Nevada Senator Harry Reid, on whose staff he used to serve. Reid seems uninterested in the metallurgy of waste containment vessels or the geology of the mountain's 40 miles of storage tunnels where the waste would be stored 1,000 feet underground or on 1,000 feet of rock. Rather, Reid, like most of all Nevadans, regards the repository as a threat to Las Vegas, and so forth and so on. The court, which was concerned only with the law, not the mountain, said the president must follow statutory mandates so long as there is appropriated money available and the president has no constitutional objection to the statute. And he has none. And Reid has not yet quite succeeded in starving the NRC of funding for the Yucca licensing process. Mark, where are you going with this? We're almost there. The NRC said Congress has not yet appropriated the full amount required to complete the process. The court said Congress often appropriates on a step-by-step basis. The NRC speculated Congress may not finish appropriating the sums necessary. The court said that allowing agencies to ignore statutory mandates based on speculation about future congressional decisions would, quote, gravely upset the balance of power between the government's branches and represent a major and unwarranted expansion of executive power at the expense of Congress, quote, unquote. The NRC said small appropriations indicate Congress's desire, and it goes on. George Will ends his column this way. This episode is a snapshot of contemporary Washington. Small, devious people putting their lawlessness in the service of their parochialism and recklessly sacrificing public safety and constitutional propriety. One can only marvel at the measured patience with which the court has tried to teach the obvious to the willfully obtuse. Now, what he's saying here in many ways is, thank goodness for the judiciary holding these people to account. Got all this lawlessness going on in administration, and the judiciary is here to help us. George Will says that because George Will has to say that. He has to believe it, even though it's not true. This is an outstanding decision by the Circuit Court in D.C., 2-1 on the panel of 3. But I will give George Will the decision in the Obamacare case, a 5-4 decision that was an absolute abomination and an evisceration of the Constitution and the rights of the citizen. And I could give George Will a dozen such cases, just off the top of my head. Because our salvation, quote unquote, legally and constitutionally, is not within the federal government. The Supreme Court gave its imprimatur to Obama violating our federal immigration laws. They called it prosecutorial discretion. The Supreme Court, 5-4 EPA decision, Massachusetts versus the EPA, wrote a blank check, in essence, if you will, for the EPA to pursue its attack on so-called climate change, global warming, even though the Clean Air Act didn't authorize it. Supreme Court legislates, executes, mandates. It's got a lot of problems. A lot of problems. So George Will writes this. This is really his second in a row about the lawlessness of this administration and the federal government. but he wants you to believe the courts will fix it. Just as this buffoon Nicole Wallace, who used to work for McCain, on the Morning Schmo, she said the answer is just electing more Republicans. No, the answer to revitalizing the Constitution, the answer to restoring the American Republic, cannot be found in the Supreme Court. It cannot be found on any circuit court. It cannot be found in the Republican Party per se in Washington, D.C. It cannot be found in Congress. These are, after all, the institutions that have brought us to this position, aren't they? Yes, they are. The answer is not where these men and women say it is. And it troubles me because they do a pretty good job of analyzing the problem. But they refuse to embrace the solution. And for all the talk about the rule of law and the Constitution, they refuse to acknowledge that part of the Constitution, or if they acknowledge it, they demean it, that provides the recourse. This is what's so troublesome and frustrating. This is why this national debate needs to occur and is occurring. Let me remind you, Article 5. We're going to make Article 5 of the Constitution famous. Article 5 provides the two processes for amending the Constitution. Not holding a constitutional convention, for amending the Constitution. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this with Georgetown University law professor Randy Barnett in the third hour. This is a direct quote from your Constitution. This was written by your framers. This was ratified by your state conventions way back when. This belongs to you. Quote, "The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments." Notice they're not saying a constitutional convention. "Which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states or by conventions in 3/4 thereof." It goes on in part, but not relevant to the point. So in neither case does the Constitution provide for a constitutional convention. It provides for two methods of amending the Constitution. The first method, Congress initiates. The second method, the states initiate. You can't have a runaway convention that has any impact on the Constitution because you need 3/4 of the states to ratify. And you won't find 13 red states ratifying the evisceration of the Constitution any further than it's already been eviscerated. And on that point, the Constitution has been eviscerated, or none of this would be meaningful. There'd be no purpose to what I'm saying. There'd be no purpose to this book. There'd be no purpose to the criticism that I've been levying. This is your document. This is your country. This is your right. On September 15th, George Mason, another man who is underestimated. You know, there have been books and movies on Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, and more. And there should be. These are great, great men. But what about George Mason? George Mason, the author of the Virginia Declaration of Rights, which preceded the Declaration of Independence by about 5 weeks, from which Thomas Jefferson borrowed when he wrote the Declaration of Independence. George Mason, one of the delegates at the Constitutional Convention, and one of the most effective. He wound up voting against the Constitution, by the way, as did a handful of others, for a couple of reasons, including the failure to abolish slavery, even though he owned some slaves. Yes, the same George Mason. So on September 15th, Mason alarmed that Congress would have the sole power to propose amendments. I'm reading this from the Liberty Amendments. Continued to insist on state authority to call for conventions. And by the way, at the time, this was relatively commonplace. States met in conventions, sent delegates, entered into compacts, and so forth. Mason explained that an oppressive Congress would never agree to propose amendments curtailing its own tyranny. Now let's turn to the great James Madison in his notes at the Constitutional Convention. And here's how he quotes what took place on the floor of the Pennsylvania Assembly Room, which is where they met, in Philadelphia at Independence Hall. Madison writes, Colonel Mason thought the plan of amending the Constitution acceptable and dangerous, as the proposing of amendments is in both the modes to depend in the first immediately and the second ultimately on Congress. No amendments of the proper kind would ever be obtained by the people if the government should become oppressive, as he verily believed would become the case. So Gouverneur Morris of Pennsylvania, Eldridge Gerry of Massachusetts, in support of Mason's position, moved to amend the article, that's Article 5, so as to require a convention on application of 2/3 of the states. That's from Madison's notes, 2 days before the end of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. Those words provide us with the recourse. Those words are attacked by the ruling class. Those words are ignored by some conservatives and objected to. I say let's embrace them. Let's embrace our Constitution to save our Constitution. Let's embrace our Constitution to restore our republic. If there's another way, then let me know what it is. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
My buddy Ed Wright reminds me that both Will and Krauthammer wrote pieces in support of John Roberts' Obamacare decision. And as for reliance on the court to take care of business, and the Liberty Amendments restoring the American Republic is full of rich citations and history and the framers and Federalists and Anti-Federalists, if that interests you. And it's only really 200 pages long. In Anti-Federalist 11, Brutus, who was believed to be New York judge, and Anti-Federalist Robert Yates, and by the way, one of the most articulate opponents of the Constitution, he was concerned about this court system. He said the real effect of this system of government will therefore be brought home to the feelings of the people through the medium of the judicial power. It is of great importance to examine with care the nature and extent of the judicial power, because those who are to be vested with it are to be placed in a situation altogether unprecedented in a free country. They are to be rendered totally independent. No errors they may commit can be corrected by any power above them, if any such power there be, nor can they be removed from office for making ever so many erroneous adjudications. In Anti-Federalist 15, Yates said, perhaps nothing could have been better conceived to facilitate the abolition of the state governments than the Constitution of the Judicial. They'll be able to extend the limits of the general government gradually and by insensible degrees, and to accommodate themselves to the temper of the people. Their decisions on the meaning of the Constitution will commonly take place in cases which arise between individuals with which the public will not be generally acquainted. One adjudication will form a precedent to the next, and this to a following one. The man was a genius. And thus it is, ladies and gentlemen, that I propose that the states with 3/5 vote, or Congress with 3/5 vote, have the power to override a majority Supreme Court decision and expunge it from the record. Oh, Mark, you're so radical. Hardly. That is with the thinking, mindset, meaning of the framers of the Constitution. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin, the conscience of conservatism. Call Mark now at 877-381-3811.
My next to last book signing is this Saturday. What's today? Thursday? 2 days away. 10 a.m., Tyson's Corner Mall, Northern Virginia, at Barnes & Noble, partnering with our brothers and sisters at WMAL. I hope you'll be there. If you haven't signed up at the Reagan Library, that'll be closed too. So this is really the last of the actual open book signings. This is it for that. And this Saturday. And Tyson's Corner has a lot of great restaurants and shopping and parking and all the rest. So if you want to come, we're going to have a blast. Here's a story on the Drudge Report. He's headlining this. And this is the kind of thing, well, let me read it to you. From Spokane, Washington. This will break your heart. World War II veteran Delbert Belton survived being wounded in action during the Battle of Okinawa, only to be beaten and left for dead by two teens at the Eagles Lodge in Spokane on Wednesday evening. Belton, 89 years old, died from the injuries he suffered in the beating this morning at Sacred Heart Medical Center. Just listen to this. And this goes on all the time. Witnesses say Belton was in the parking lot of the Eagles Lodge adjacent to the Eagles Ice Arena around 8 p.m. Wednesday when the two male suspects attacked him. So they just attacked this old man. He died from his injuries. Shorty, as he was known by his friends at the Eagles Lodge, served in the U.S. Army in the Pacific during World War II and was shot in the leg during the Battle of Okinawa. He went on to work at Kaiser Aluminum at the company's Trentwood plant for more than 30 years. He loved playing pool, even though he claimed he was no good at it. Been a member of the Eagles Lodge for the last 4 months. In addition to playing pool, he loved working on cars. His wife passed away several years ago. So here's this old-timer who served his country heroically, who was a working man, paid his taxes, took care of his family. In the final years of his life, trying to enjoy them, and he goes out to the parking lot and he's beaten to death. Spokane police are looking for 2 male suspects in the attack. They said the suspects are African Americans between 16 and 19 years old. One suspect was described as heavyset and wearing all black clothing. The other was described as being about 6 feet tall and 150 pounds. There was no description of what clothing the second suspect was wearing other than a silk do-rag. Police investigating the deadly attack on Belton are also working to obtain surveillance footage from the scene. Now, you know what, folks? This is a horrible, 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 not tragedy, crime. It's disgusting. It's inhumane. It's barbaric. And it's happening from one end of this country to another. I heard one of the folks on the 5, I can't remember which one, saying, well, crime is down in this country. Well, so what? That's good as a statistic. But that doesn't help this poor old man, who must have been thinking to himself, I've lived 89 years. I've seen war. And I'm going to die this way? By 2 young punks beating me to death? In the parking lot of the Eagles Lodge, where I go to play pool? And Barack Obama won't say a damn thing. And every host in this country is going to say exactly what I'm about to say right now. This white man was murdered by two black men. And if I were Al Sharpton or Jesse Jackson or Barack Obama or the mostly white liberal media in this country and the mostly white liberal attorney commentators in this country, what would I be saying today? If this poor gentleman were a black man beaten by two white punks. Isn't it interesting how we dehumanize people? Isn't it? Isn't it interesting how Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and the president and the media and all these comments, isn't it interesting how they dehumanize people? How the issue immediately becomes race and not humanity? I guarantee you, there are black men and women in this audience listening to this story who are brokenhearted about this man being beaten to death. 89 years old, World War II vet. Or just as ticked off as I am. But the politicians can't control themselves. They can't help themselves. To have the President of the United States get involved in a case like the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman case is a complete disgrace. And he is a disgraceful hypocrite. Because he doesn't say a damn thing about crimes that occur like this one. I thought for a minute he'd go on court TV. Does that still even exist? And he'd be a commentator commenting on every single crime from a racial perspective. That's what was so outrageous about him demagoguing that issue and Eric Holder doing the same damn thing. The fact of the matter is, according to the Obama administration's crime statistics, that the overwhelming majority of crimes committed in this country are black-on-black crimes. And you would think the President and the Attorney General would be particularly sensitive to it, but they're not. They're not. It's all about racial politics and race baiting. This is somebody's grandfather, maybe great-grandfather, somebody's father, beaten to death for no damn reason whatsoever. Wrong place, wrong time. Does it really matter what color he is? No, it doesn't matter at all. Does it really matter what color these punks wear? No, it really doesn't matter at all. We're all Americans. This man, his life should not have ended this way. And they better throw the book at these punks once they catch them. 16 and 19-year-old. One heavy set, wearing black clothing. The other about 6 feet tall, wearing a silk do-rag. Must be proud of themselves for beating up an 89-year-old man. I'll bet that was real tough. What goes through somebody's mind? What kind of a human being are you to do that? I'm looking at a picture of this man. Delbert Belton. Mr. Producer, can we get our military songs ready, please? And in honor of Mr. Belton, now deceased, in honor of him, the Marines.
Levin.
Tea Party Patriots, baby. Past few weeks, I've been telling you about my friends at the Tea Party Patriots and their August Recess Toolkit. Now's the time to take action. Your representatives are back home from Washington. They're holding town halls, and you need to show up. Go to TeaPartyToolkit.com right now and find out where these town hall meetings are happening across the nation. Download the toolkit, show up at the town halls, and tell the professional ruling class you've had enough. There's so many important issues like amnesty, the out-of-control spending, and what is our last chance to stop Obamacare. In fact, the president has exempted big business from Obamacare. The labor unions don't want it. Now Congress is getting special treatment that protects them from their own law. If Obamacare isn't good enough for big business, big labor, and big government, then it surely isn't good enough for you, the American people. So go to TeaPartyToolkit.com right now and get involved. That's TeaPartyToolkit.com. And by the way, you ought to bring a copy of my book with you, The Liberty Amendments, and hold it up. And just let them know that you're thinking of a way of bypassing them altogether. That'll make them nervous. All right, I have information. I have been told the following. There was a House Republican members conference call from 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time just now. So it ended less than an hour ago. The Republican leadership, that would be Boehner and Cantor and McCarthy, they told the Republican members they will not try. They will not try to defund Obamacare through the continuing resolution. And they're content to fighting for the continuing sequestration level reductions in spending. No more. It's a minuscule level. And they're planning for a short-term continuing resolution, for example, from October through the end of November or December. This is your Johnny Boehner, ladies and gentlemen. I said several months ago, maybe I ought to repeat this, and maybe this ought to be it. Rather than calling it Obamacare, we should call it Boehner-Care. Remember that, Mr. Producer? So I think I'm going to call it Boehner-Care, if I can remember from time to time, certainly more often. Because Boehner won't even fight. Boehner, he's just, is the word pathetic appropriate? I think it's appropriate. I'll give you another example. Here's National Review Online, Jonathan Strong. Senior Republican aides of a super PAC linked to Speaker John Boehner, listen to this, are lobbying House Republicans to pass the Senate Gang of Eight immigration bill, legislation Boehner has said he will not bring to the House floor. See how Boehner does it? He's got his PAC that he's been supporting and raising funds for, lobbying Republican members, his own Republican members in the House, to support the Gang of Eight immigration bill or something like it, while he's publicly saying, no, we're going to break it into little pieces. This guy's a snake. He's absolutely dishonest. And my great fear is he's so pathetic and incompetent, as are the rest of them, quite frankly, that conservatives are not going to turn out in the next election or we'll lose the damn House. We're tired of these quislings and their dealings. And we're tired of all the Bush staffers and ex-McCain staffers writing their little hit pieces on conservatives who dare to stand up to them. So Boehner's got quite the little inside-outside game going on with his super PAC linked to him is lobbying House Republicans, according to National Review Online's Jonathan Strong, to pass the Senate Gang of Eight immigration bill, which he says he opposes. And what he's going to use is salami tactics. Cut it into little pieces, get it passed with Democrat support, send it to a conference committee, and then it's over. You're Speaker of the House, who you put there, we put there, in 2010 with that election. Just elect more Republicans, you see, that'll fix it. More Republicans like him, oh, it'll fix it. It'll screw us once and for all. As I've said so many times, what the hell does the Republican Party stand for today? I know what the Democrat Party stands for. I really do. Totalitarianism, ultimately. That's what they stand for. But what's the Republican Party stand for? Appeasement. That's why I call them the French Republicans. Appeasement. You think the answers are there? You think the answers are with John Boehner and Mitch McConnell? You think the answers are with Eric Cantor? I just told you now my inside information. This 1-hour conference call with Republican members in the House where Boehner said, not only are we surrendering, we are not going to support a vote to stand up to Obamacare. So it's Boehner care. And we should start repeating it. Boehner care, Boehner care. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Well, we only have 1/2 or 1/3. Well, then why do you ask us to elect you? So in other words, if we can't take the Senate, then we shouldn't take the House because you're impotent. That seems to be your argument. If we can't take the Senate, then we shouldn't take the House. Because apparently what the Republicans are saying really is kind of what Obama's saying. What the Republicans are saying is, if we can't control the House and the Senate and the presidency, we can't get anything done. I'd say it's time for new Republicans. A new Speaker of the House. New so-called Republican leadership. It's not leadership in any respect. That's not how you define it. I'll be right back.
He's here. Now, broadcasting from the underground command post, deep in the bowels of a hidden bunker, somewhere under the brick and steel of a nondescript building, we've once again made contact with our leader, Mark Levin.
Hello, everybody. This is the Power Hour, the final hour of my program. I'm Mark Levin. The number, 877-381-3811, 877-381-3811. I leave nothing on the table. When this program is over, it's all done. All done. I have a great guest at the bottom of the hour. Somebody just sent me this. Very interesting. From Cleveland.com, the Plain Dealer website, dated August 15th. Governor John Kasich calls for a constitutional convention on federal balanced budget amendment. I just wish people would get the phrasing down because it makes a difference. It's not a constitutional convention. There is no such thing under the Constitution. But let's proceed anyway. Columbus, Ohio. Governor John Kasich urged the General Assembly today to press for a convention to approve a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And, folks, this is something Ronald Reagan pressed for as well, and others. In a news release this morning, the governor expressed frustration the government in Washington had not addressed budgetary issues and the federal debt. Said the federal government just doesn't get it, and its inability to manage the American taxpayers' money is inexcusable. By the way, he's embraced Obamacare, is instituting it, so, I mean, you know, all these guys have serious, serious dents in their armor. Anyway, Kasich, a former member of Congress, played a key role in the drafting of the last balanced federal budgets. The state should call for a constitutional convention. Governor, the state should call for a convention to propose amendments to the Constitution. But he goes on, where a balanced budget amendment can be approved and sent to the states for ratification. Hopefully, however, Congress will pass an amendment itself before it gets that far. In the meantime, I'm going to work with the General Assembly to put Ohio behind this effort. Folks, it is little pieces, and it's going to take a lot of time. So don't, you know, I don't want to give you the misimpression. I don't want you to misunderstand. This is going to take time. But we've got to press the case. And if you understand the case that we need to press, it's all laid out in the Liberty Amendments. This actually is one of them. It's not exactly one of them. But there should be some hope. You know, some aspiration, some positive notions about what's doable, even though daunting and difficult. What can we do? What can we do? Let's surrender. It's inevitable. No. I've been telling a number of the people I've interviewed with throughout these few days, the other hosts, that I don't believe in static economics. Reagan didn't believe in that either. You know, there's a vibrancy to the economy. And I don't believe in static politics either. Some of you live in very, very blue states, and you're very blue about it. You wonder, how the hell are we ever going to get out of this? Well, guess what? Depending on events, mostly negative events, certainly conceivable you will. But we don't need every blue state. We just need 34 states out of the 50 to call for a state convention. And we don't need governors, we need state legislatures. And so this is something to aspire to. It's certainly something to discuss and debate at great length. And you can see some of these prominent politicians now are talking about it. And some of them will trash it, and we'll deal with all of that. But I think it's important to remember this. And I think I mentioned this, but I can't remember. Hold on 1 second. Let me look here real fast. Wasn't planning on doing this, but I am doing it. President Dwight Eisenhower was not considered a right-winger. In fact, he was considered a fairly moderate Republican. I'd say today, definitely right of center. And a great man, a great general. Not an intemperate man. Very level-headed man, as a matter of fact. And he was giving a speech at a college, a commencement speech. And he was fed up with the size of the federal government. I believe it was in 1963. I can't find it right now. It's in the last chapter of the book. He was fed up with the Warren Court. Was fed up with the direction of the federal government. Oh, yes. Oh, here it is. And Dwight Eisenhower, during his commencement address in May 1963 at Defiance College in Ohio, of all places, he urged the graduating class to help return the rights lost to what he said was, quote, a distant bureaucracy. This is 50 years ago. Can you imagine what he would say today with Obamacare and so forth? He said, quote, through their state legislatures and without regard to the federal government, the people can demand and participate in constitutional conventions. Now, you and I know that's not a proper phrase, but let's go with it. In which they can, through their own action, adopt such amendments as can and will reverse any trends they see as fatal to true representative government. And speaking of the balanced budget that Governor Kasich is talking about, during his presidency, President Ronald Reagan referred repeatedly and approvingly to the state convention process in his battles with Congress over federal spending, a balanced budget, and the budget process. He was fed up with it. I'll give you an example. Again, this is in the Liberty Amendments. On August 12, 1987, in a nationally televised speech from the Oval Office, Reagan stated, among other things, that, quote, the congressional budget process is neither reliable nor credible. In short, it needs to be fixed. We desperately need the power of a constitutional amendment to help us balance our budget. Over 70% of the American people want such an amendment. They want the federal government to have what 44 state governments already have, discipline. And if the Congress continues to oppose the wishes of the people by avoiding a vote on our balanced budget amendment, the call for constitutional convention will grow louder. Again, we know the proper phraseology, but we know what Reagan meant. What do you think he'd say today? The state convention process, folks, provides a constitutional way out. Whereas George Mason declared the federal government should become oppressive. And the Liberty Amendments offer a collection of reforms, a plan based on our founding principles, which address the most severe malpractices and distortions of the left and the Republics. by decentralizing the accumulation of federal power, reviving federalism, and securing consensual government. And that's the bottom line. Changing the decision-making process. Well, Mark, what if a president or Congress refuses to abide by these amendments? The decisions won't be made by them, ladies and gentlemen. Moving these amendments mostly move ultimate decision-making authority from an all-powerful central government back to we the people. And all we're saying here is that the states will propose amendments rather than Congress. There are critics who will defend the status quo while claiming not to, who will attack this process, knee-jerk, having not read the book, having not studied the issue. I don't care what they think. They don't matter. If they're going to be flip, that's their problem. What we're talking about is actually using the Constitution to save the Constitution, to reestablish the constitutional order and restore the Republic. That's what we're talking about, embracing the constitutional process set forth in the Constitution, the state convention process. My amendments aren't mandatory, obviously. There may be other ideas. There may be suggestions in reforming them or altering them. That's perfectly fine. As for the left, or as I call them, the statists, they don't need a convention to achieve what they want. We're living what they want. A centralized government with concentrated power contravening the Constitution. And I'm sorry to say the Republican leadership in Congress, the Republican establishment in Washington, their cheerleaders, various websites, bloggers, they have no answer. None. None. So what we seek to do, what I seek to do, is have a discussion as to promote our ideas, which we take from our framers. That we move to the grassroots, we move to federalism. Some talk about federalism, but they don't really mean it, do they? They actually fear it when push comes to shove. The Constitution has been altered. It's been altered over the last 100 years. We have to accept that fact in order to do something about it. It's been altered to the point where I contend that we live in a post-constitutional period. Not for every single matter in every single case, but fundamentally because the Constitution has been turned on its head. Rather than the states having plenary or general authority, the federal government does. The federal government does. And you know, the entrenched professional ruling class, they keep changing the Constitution. 3 years ago it was Obamacare. And they're going to keep changing the Constitution. The First Amendment, religious liberty, and subsidizing abortion through Obamacare. The Second Amendment is under ceaseless attack. Chip, chip, chip away. The Fourth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment. Due process rights. Property rights under the so-called Takings Clause. The Ninth Amendment has been read out of the Constitution as utterly meaningless. And I'll tell you what's interesting about the Ninth and Tenth Amendments. The framers in the state ratification debates read them together. Individual liberty and state sovereignty. And Massachusetts, New York, and Virginia, in one form or another, strongly urged that when the first Congress would meet, that they would propose amendments, but among them, what turned out to be the Ninth and Tenth Amendment in so many words. And today, they're treated as if they're non-existent. As they must be, by the courts, by Congress, and a president. Because, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of talk lately about utopianism. I wrote a whole book on it called Ameritopia. And what's interesting about this is you cannot have a constitutional republic and an all-powerful, ubiquitous, centralized government. They cannot coexist, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you today, they don't coexist. The federal government's getting increasingly more powerful. The president today is giving a speech about how he thinks colleges and universities should conduct themselves and what he's planning on doing to colleges and universities. I'm no great fan of these Marxist crap holes. Don't get me wrong, but that's not the point. The federal government does not own our colleges and universities. The federal government should not be owning our automobile companies. The federal government should not be owning our health care. It can only get worse. It can only get worse because they have eviscerated the Constitution. And what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, is the Constitution is the answer. And it's one thing to keep saying it, but look at it. Look at Article 5. Read the book. Go to the library and get a copy. You may disagree with me. You may still say, woe is me, I surrender. Perfectly fine, that's up to you. I choose not to. I want my children to live free and to live well. I'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
Okay, let's go to the calls here. We have a great guest at the bottom of the hour. Wayne, Massachusetts on the Mark Levin app. And those of you who do not have access to this program, at times you want to go get the Mark Levin app. It's free. Download it. Wayne, how are you?
I'm good, Mark. It was great to see you on Sunday at Bookends in New Jersey. I was one of the first people.
You were one of the first people, and you drove down, as I recall, from Massachusetts.
Yeah, it was almost 4 hours, round trip, 405 miles.
Unbelievable. I hope I was nice to you.
No, of course you were, because you asked me, you're like, what's your name? I'm like, Wayne Ray. And then you're like, okay, you're like, call the show. I'm like, I will. I'm like, this week.
Well, that's great. So, wasn't that fun? That was some line, wasn't it?
Oh, it's fun. Yeah, I want to shout out to Daria, Mark, Juan, and Gene. I met them in line, and they were really wicked nice people. So I just wanted to shout out to them because they made the time go by so quick. So it was some other people, too, but I forgot their names. But they were... But,
Wayne, I want you to let everybody know, and you kind of are now, you make a lot of friends in line with fellow patriots and so forth who you keep in touch with, don't you?
Yeah. I like the songs, the military songs. I know one of them quite well. Off we go into the wild blue yonder. I've been in the Air Force for 15 years this past June.
Well, you're great. I'm glad you came. That's a long trip, and I appreciate it. And God bless you, my friend.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, take care of yourself. John, let's see if we can slip you in fast. Stockton, California, the great KSFO. Go.
Hey, great one. How you doing?
All right, my friend.
Wanted to get your opinion on actually adding one amendment to your book. Obviously, that's
you got to go fast. We're going to run out of time.
Okay. The amendment is to allow direct impeachment of the president by a supermajority of the states, and then to make an alteration to your Chapter 10, which I haven't got to yet. I'm halfway through Chapter 9.
All right, John, we're going to run out of time. We'll read Chapter 10 and then suggest the alteration. Okay. People have 1,000 ideas. Mine are intended to make systemic changes that return us to what the framers, I believe, intended. When we come back, a great guest. You're not going to want to miss this.
Mark Levin doesn't just read the news, he makes the news. Call the Mark Levin Show now at 877-381-3811.
There are a number of very, very bright men and women who support this state convention process. And one of the brightest of the bunch is Georgetown University Law School professor, a friend of mine, Randy Barnett. Randy, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, Mark, and I'm a big fan of yours.
Well, thank you. Now, Randy, tell the audience, why do you believe we need to turn to this state convention process in the first place?
Well, the Article 5 convention process was put into the Constitution as a means of getting around Congress if Congress ever became the problem for which you need constitutional amendments. Because obviously, if the reason for a constitutional amendment is Congress, then Congress isn't going to propose them. You need some other route. And the founders put into the Constitution the state-initiated convention a route in order to get around Congress. And all that the convention does, if two-thirds of the states vote to have one, is it becomes like an alternate Congress. Congress has the power right now with supermajorities to propose amendments to the states, and then the states must ratify them. And what an amendments convention does, and as you know, it's properly called an amendments convention, not a constitutional convention, but what an amendments convention has the power to do is do exactly what Congress has the power to do today, and that is propose amendments to the states for ratification, and that's what we need.
And we need it because the federal government is not what the framers intended, is it, Randy?
No, the Constitution's been changed officially and unofficially, and the official changes have been almost as important as the unofficial ones. The unofficial ones are the expanded powers that Congress has claimed and the courts have gone along with over the last 50 or 60 years. But the official ones are also important. In 1913, the progressives got two amendments into the Constitution, into the real Constitution, that really altered the structure of our government. One was the 16th Amendment, which authorized an income tax that the Supreme Court had previously said was unconstitutional, and that gave Congress enormous amounts of money to spend, which meant that that the spending power, which before that was a relatively minor power, became a very major power. And as you know, most of what Congress does, it does pursuant to its spending power. It's the income tax amendment gave them all the money to spend, and then the 17th Amendment eliminated the selection of senators by states, which was what the original design was, and made for popular election of senators, and that disconnected the federal government and the Congress in particular from the state governments that formerly had a role in choosing the upper chamber. And so there's been structural changes to the Constitution already made officially and then unofficially by the courts. And what I think we need is amendments that are going to restore the way the Constitution originally was supposed to work.
Now, I'm asking you these questions rhetorically because I address them in my book and I've addressed them on the air. But you're a very serious man about these issues. You're a scholar. And so my question is, what do you say to people who say, well, you'll have a runaway convention?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, all that a convention can do is propose amendments. I do believe it's possible that states can limit the scope of these conventions by the way in which they authorize their representatives to their delegates and how they authorize their delegates to behave while they're at the convention. But even if that weren't true, as you have pointed out on the air and as you pointed out in your book, anything that comes out of an amendments convention is simply a set of proposals. And then it's got to go. Those proposals must be ratified by 3/4 of the states, which is going to include a lot of red states and it's going to include a lot of blue states. So unless these amendments meet the requirements of the state legislatures in 3/4 of the states, they are never going to become part of the Constitution, no matter what a convention does.
Mm-hmm. There's really no other alternative, is there, Randy Barnett?
Well, I do think that it's been shown that our recent experience has shown that it's very, very difficult to change things radically or to change things to the way they need to be changed simply by electing more politicians. It's not that you can't make any changes that way, and ultimately, as you know, this convention process is a long shot. There's no guarantee it's going to happen, and we're going to have to keep fighting on all fronts. But let's put it this way. This is one of the tools. This is one of the arsenals in our one of the tools in our arsenal, one of the weapons in our arsenal, and we shouldn't just leave it laying there. When I got into this, Mark, about in 2010, when there were a lot of state legislatures that were passing state sovereignty resolutions and nullification resolutions, none of which would have had any legal effect. And reporters asked me about those proposals, and I said, look, if the states want to do something that is within their power, a power they were given by the founders in the Constitution itself, they can propose an amendments convention. And every time we've ever come close to having one of these, Mark, Congress then propose the amendments themselves. That's one of the reasons why we have amendments to the Constitution that we've got, and that is that people have been working through the states, people get nervous about having a convention, and then Congress proposes the amendments themselves. And that's why we haven't had a convention. But we have to try for one in order to get the changes that we need to restore the Constitution.
I feel, Randy Barnett, law professor, Georgetown University, I feel that the more oppressive the government gets, the bigger it gets, the more it interferes, and it's certainly that's the trajectory, and it's really moving very quickly in that direction. More and more people are going to look for an escape route, don't you?
I do, but one of the things that you see electorally, and one of the reasons why the convention route stands some chance of success is that the composition of state legislatures, which are made up by a diverse group of men and women citizens and legislators from around the country, is different than the composition of what we see in Washington, of the legislators we see in Washington, in part because these states are not just dominated by the big cities that are in them, and national politics gets warped by large metropolitan areas, and state politics can reflect a lot more of the people that are spread throughout the country who listen to this program. And as a result, that's one of the reasons why you see, Republican state legislatures and Republican governors in these legislatures, and that's why we have a chance of getting amendments to the Constitution that is going to restore the original meaning of the Constitution.
I believe I saw that we have 27 Republican legislatures right now. I mean, and this is without a concerted effort under Article 5. And Randy Barnett, the other thing is when you look at these maps they always show of all these red areas, and then there's a relatively small number of blue areas, just to your point, and these are population centers, concentrated of population, the big cities and so forth, as you point out. Federalism addresses that, doesn't it? The diversity of the population, the diversity of the geography, the diversity of the states. Correct?
It's the reason why we have the system that we've got. We do not have a system of unmitigated majoritarian democracy. In fact, that's what we kind of had state by state before the Constitution, and it proved to be disastrous because these majoritarian state legislatures, they started giving special privileges to the people who had the most votes, which is debtors as opposed to creditors, and they started erecting trade barriers. And the founders said, well, we got to get out of this mass democracy system, and democracy was considered a slur back at that point, and we've got to get into a system of Republican government where the people are ultimately the check on the governors, but we don't have majoritarian rule per se. And that's the reason we have the system of government we have, and that's the reason why I think we have a fighting chance to restore constitutional government in this country.
I want to ask you a question. We don't have a lot of time left, but you are one of the preeminent experts on the Commerce Clause. And in writing this book, I studied almost everything you've ever written on the Commerce Clause. Absolutely brilliant. You're in the book as relates to the Commerce Clause. What do you say to liberals or even some Republicans who say, look, but for the modern interpretation of the Commerce Clause by the executive and the bureaucracy, we wouldn't have the FDA, we wouldn't have child labor laws, we wouldn't have this, we wouldn't have that. My attitude is, okay, great. If it was limited to that, maybe we wouldn't have a problem, but that's not really what the Commerce Clause does. What the Commerce Clause is open up everything to federal intervention.
Well, the way they've been interpreted, absolutely. And, by the way, my copy of the book is arriving tomorrow. Amazon's copy is delivering tomorrow, so I'll get to see
your own name in print.
All the nice things you said about me. Absolutely, Mark. And look, one of the things that I hear a lot is that if it weren't for the Commerce Clause, we wouldn't have civil rights laws. But in fact, there's Section 5 of the 14th Amendment that specifically gives Congress the power to enforce civil rights. And if Congress were to use that power to enforce civil rights and that we're upheld under that power, it wouldn't be necessary to give Congress the power over all economic activity in the country just so they have the power to enforce civil rights. I think against the states. I think it is important for Congress to be able to enforce civil rights against the states because states were a big abuser of civil rights. That's why I approve of the 14th Amendment. But it's not important to give Congress the power of the entire national economy just so that it has the power to enforce civil rights.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well, Randy Barnett, I really appreciate it. Maybe from time to time I will be inviting you on just because I enjoy talking to you, first of all. And secondly, you really do know your... by the way, you're teaching at... what are you teaching this semester at Georgetown?
I'm teaching Constitutional Law 2, which is our constitutional rights course in the fall, and in the spring I'm teaching contracts, and my seminar, Recent Books on the Constitution. So that's my lineup this year, and I have a new edition of my book, Restoring the Lost Constitution, coming out at the end of this year. It's a book by Princeton Press. There's a new updated edition coming out by the end of the year, Restoring the Lost Constitution.
Beautiful. All right, Professor, God bless you, my friend.
Thanks, Mark. Anytime you want me, I'm here.
All right, take care of yourself. There are very, very smart people, some of them professors, who support this process. And in my own view, the more difficult the federal government becomes vis-a-vis we the people, the more aggressively oppressive, the more it seizes our liberty and the more it seizes our property in one form or another. More and more people are going to be looking for recourse. And I do not want them to look to violence, rioting, and other forms of, or even civil unrest. There's something we can do. And I think over time it won't be a quote-unquote long shot. I think over time it'll be the only available option. But you know what? You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to agree with anything I'm saying. You don't have to agree with any of the reforms I put in the book. But take a look at them. I think it'll get you thinking. It may even excite you and motivate you and start debating these issues and trying to persuade other people. And you'll notice during the course of these programs, I don't just sit here, the book. You'll notice politics, economic activity, social, cultural activity, they all meet, ultimately, because I just defined, in essence, what a society is. And the federal government, as I've said and written, is trying to devour that society. So rather than individuals on their own making decisions, the federal government imposes its will and tries to reshape us and our decisions. And that's what's going on, and that's what I mean by this phony utopianism. But all of that intersects. When you look at the homepage of the Drudge Report, or you go to Lucienne, or you go to the Free Republic, or you go to Breitbart, or you go to Instapundit, or you go to American Spectator, or Newsmax, you go to Newsbusters, or you go to CNS News, all these sites and many more. You see the news stories, one after another. They all build into this whole. I don't mean they're all the same, but they affect the same principles. And so the question is, when you think your country, as I do, is unraveling because of what the statists are doing, they're involved in so much and they will not stop, and they have this notion of utterly expansive federal intervention in your private lives. What can we do about it? It's only going to get worse. Well, this is my attempt to describe it. So I don't just say, here, let me talk about the book. The fact of the matter is, when I wrote the book, I was intending to address the things that we discuss and the things that go on every day. It's no coincidence. It's no accident. It was planned that way. All right. Prominent national news anchor is calling conservative patriots Ted Cruz and Mike Lee terrorists. Can you guess who this despicable fraud is? Check out liberalmediabs.com to see how well you know the radically leftist media. These people are so far out there, it's mind-boggling. See, the so-called news media, well, they don't report the news at all. They use their positions to try to brainwash Americans with left-wing propaganda, and they slander people they don't agree with, people like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee, and people like you and me. Take a minute, just a minute, and check out liberalmediabs.com. They've got a little quiz on there so you can see how good you are at separating facts from liberal media lies and paranoia. And as conservatives, it's critical for us to know what the media are really up to. And if you answer enough questions correctly, you could win a prize. So go ahead and take a look at liberalmediabs.com. It's full of glaring examples of just how unhinged and radical the media are and how they're nothing more than mouthpieces for the Obama administration. Check it out for yourself. It's liberalmediabs.com. Forward it to your friends, too, by the way. That's liberalmediabs.com.
Mark Levin.
Other stories I wanted to get to today, and we always have tomorrow. I can't believe tomorrow's Friday already. These weeks go too fast, and these shows go too fast. But there's a very interesting story on the Washington Free Beacon by Bill Gertz. You can find it linked on the Drudge Report. The Obama administration considers a plan to bolster Mexico's southern border, a 3-layer security line 140 miles from their southern border aimed to fight drug and human trafficking. So in other words, we are going to give billions of dollars and technical assistance to the Mexican regime to secure its southern border with Guatemala and Belize. Can you believe that? Meanwhile, our southern border is not secure. And this is apparently some secret deal worked out with the former Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano. All these secret deals. In fact, the spokesman for that department would not say if the southern Mexico border security was discussed during the recent Napolitano visit. He referred questions about the 3-tier border security system to the White House. And, of course, what did the White House do? They referred him back to the department. This is the game they play. Mexican embassy wouldn't talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. So the American border, we don't have a 3-tier system that I'm aware of, but if we do, it must be antiquated because an awful lot of people get here. Mexico's responsibility is Mexico's border. And on several occasions I've read to you on the air what the Mexican immigration plan is. And what have I said? Rip the cover page off, put our cover page on, and just say, America's Comprehensive Immigration Reform Plan. We'll take their law and we'll apply it. So that's one story. Also, there is a great piece by our friend Cal Thomas. I'm not going to have time to get into it, but he goes into the National Health Service. And he says each visit to the UK brings new horror stories about their government-run healthcare system. I mean, they did a report, 14 underperforming hospitals. This is just one example. In England, substandard care, contributing to the needless deaths of nearly 13,000 people in 2005. Folks, this is our future. But John Boehner just told the Republicans, because I think they could see that the people were rising up at these town hall meetings, he told the Republicans today, no, we're not going to vote to defund Obamacare. We salute our armed forces, police officers, firefighters, and emergency personnel. My fellow Americans, my fellow patriots, I'll see you right here tomorrow. I'm Mark Levin.